results, because that's what we actually used a fair bit of the results to put into our economic analysis to calculate the indexes. So this first slide just shows you a summary of basically commercial flock breeding details. So just to be clear, what we want to get details about the commercial flock, because that's where that's the target of your breeding objective. That's where it's where the improvements in traits are actually realised in commercial operations. So you can see there, I've got three. I've broken it up by those three groups: border Leicesters, commercial maternals, and shedding sheep, or just in So we've got fertility conception rates there, scanning percentages, weaning percentages, and you can see those for yourselves. The fourth row there is whether or not ewes are mated as yearlings, and you can see that was what I've got there is more or less the ratio. So for commercial maternals, 80% of the respondents are saying that they mate ewes as yearlings, and 75% for the commercial shedders, although there's only 4 responses there. It was more like 40-60 for border Leicesters, so less likely to do that in borders. Then the last one there is the mature weight, and you can see ranging from 65 kilos to 71 kilos for commercial maternals. Now these are sort of lamb performance details. I just said straight bred lambs, but in the case of border Leicesters, that's really what that means is the border Leicester Merino crossbred lambs, surplus lambs that are sold. So you can see there sale age ranging from 5.5 to 7.1 months, and I guess the carcass weights are the important thing there. We're aiming at sort of 21 to 23 kilo carcass weights, and prices down the bottom there ranging from $4.80 to $5.40. And then there's also terminal cross lambs, and you can see they're a little bit, the responses there differ from the last ones. They're selling them at an earlier age, but really aiming for similar carcass weights, and the prices are about the same down the bottom there. And then we had questions about wool production and price, and that's the summary there of similar fleece weights for borders and commercial maternals, but higher price for borders. Now, one important issue that we wanted to get at with the survey was the importance of mature ewe size. So, as you'd all know, increasing mature ewe weight is a concern for commercial flocks, and that's basically because larger ewes eat more feed, so you can stocking rates have to be lower, and there's been issues of just being more difficult to handle larger ewes. So some reasons why that's actually happened over time. It's I guess largely correlated changes due to selection for increase in early growth. So body weight at early ages is highly correlated with mature size. So if you're improving early growth, then that's will tend to lead to increases in adult mature weight. And also there's a small positive correlation with female reproduction. So if you're improving reproduction, then part of that will be realised through increases in body weight. So there was a question in the survey, was based around a statement about whether people agreed or disagree with the statement that reducing adult ewe weight is of high importance. And this table shows you how the responses fell. You can see that firstly for border Leicesters, most people were neutral, so 7 out of 11 responses, 7 out of 11 people thought that it wasn't important for borders. But for commercial maternals, it was considered important. So 7 out of 11 responses either agreed that reducing adult weight was of high importance, and so 2 strongly agree and 5 agree. 2 people were neutral and 2 disagree. The last row there, we've only got 4 surveys there, and only 3 actually responded to that question. So it's hard to draw conclusions about that. So I don't know if there are any questions, if people want to discuss that at this stage or not. It's part of the indexes that we develop later on, so there'll be a chance later on as well. Just a couple of other issues that are of relevance. First one is the use of terminal size in self-replacing maternal flocks. Obviously, in border lesters, it's part of the system really that is the target. But people also were responding that they use that terminal size are used in self-replacing flocks. So, and basically, obviously that's all about increasing enterprise efficiency so that you can get a sire line selected for growth and carcass and maternal lines selected for female traits. And in fact, it's one way of addressing that mature ewe weight issue, is to get the growth from the terminal sire line rather than concentrate going all out on the maternal line. Anyway, in terms of the responses, the commercial maternal, the majority of responses indicated it was a range of 25 to 50% of the commercial flock would be mated to terminal size, and for the shedding breeds, it was less important. It was either none or 0 to 25%. So I've used that as a basis for how we formulate the objectives again. And then the last one I just wanted to touch on, the last part of the survey, was the importance of internal parasites. So for commercial maternals, 60% of the responses rated parasites as significant or very significant. So we have resistance to parasites in that particular objective, which I'll show you in a minute. And but it was less important to border lesters and the shedding breeds. So that's the survey. And as a result of that, we have developed 3 new breeding objectives and indexes for them. So the first one I've just called BLX, border lester crossing system. And second one is CMDP, so that's commercial maternal dual purpose. And the last one is CMC, so that's commercial maternal carcass, so no wool in that one. So, and these are just the names that I've called them at the moment. I'm sure somebody will think up some better ones than that. That's how I'm labelling them in the presentation. So, just to go through each one of those, what's the breeding objective is. So for the BLX one, it's all about border lester size mated to merino ewes, male offspring sold as lambs, and then the females joined as first cross ewes. And then those first cross ewes mated to terminal size, got them first lambing at 2 years of age. You'll remember that was 60-40 in favour of 2 years back in the survey, and retaining them for 5 joinings. I've assumed 120% weaning rate, which is slightly conservative compared to what the survey said. I've got March joining and October weaning. These were other things that were asked in the survey, but it was a bit hard to conclude because the responses were so variable. There wasn't an obvious one to pick. I've just arbitrarily picked March for joining and October for weaning. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter terribly much when you do that. Now, the limited feed period, that's a concept that we use in our breeding objective software. So we define a period of the year during which feed is limited, and it's only during that time of the year that we include costs in our economic model. So you can see there that I've actually chosen a fairly long limited feed period, so for November to August. So it's in fact 10 months of the year that we're going to be costing feed for. Again, the impact of that really is that we're accounting for higher costs due to feed, which I think is probably a good thing. It helps with it basically puts more pressure on reducing adult ewe size for one thing. But it's sort of to my way of thinking, it's a little bit more realistic to cost feed for longer than for shorter. But it is an arguable, something that can be debated. Mature ewe weight there, 67 kilos. That was what we got from the survey. Lamb sale weight, basically the same thing, and the carcass price. I've also included a premium for eye muscle depth, which is an increase in price of 20 cents per millimetre of eye muscle. That wasn't a question in the survey, but it's just the way that we put an economic value on improving carcass performance. And at that level, it gives us realistic results. Fleece weight and price are basically from the survey. So that's those are the basic production parameters that we're assuming for this BLX enterprise, from which we use our model to develop economic values, which then go into the index. The next one is CMDP. So just to remind you, that's self-replacing dual-purpose flock. And here I've made the assumption that 30% of the ewes in this commercial flock will be mated to terminal size. Again, that's in line with the survey. This time we're assuming lambing from 1 year old and retaining ewes for up to six joinings. That 120% weaning rate is again a little bit lower, but and again I'm being conservative, but I was thinking that including 1 year old ewes, then that would tend to pull that back anyway. And I've used the same joining, weaning and limited feed periods there. Mature ewe weight is higher than it was for boarders, 72 kilos. And the lamb sale weights, carcass price and eye muscle premiums, you can see there. And ewe clean fleece weight, 3.7 kilos, 5.70 cents price. That it basically again comes from the survey results. And the last thing there is that we include WEC in the breeding objective, and you'll see what sort of changes that we induce shortly. Okay, so the last one is CMC, so that's the self-replacing meat flock with no wool, so it will be suitable for shedding sheep, obviously, but could equally be used by any enterprise. Same as with the last one, first lambing at 1 year old and retaining for 6 joinings, 120% weaning rate, the joining and weaning limited feed period as per the last one. Mature ewe weight is a little bit lower, 65 kilos, and sale weight of 45. Slightly lower carcass price, but the same eye muscle premium. And just to be clear, there's no mating to terminal size in this objective, and we did not include WEC either. So having developed those breeding objectives, we calculate economic weights for the traits which drive profit and turn that into an index. So we've got an index for each objective, and again I'm just labelling them BLX, CMDP and CMC. But in addition to that, I've made variants, a second variant for each objective in which the change in mature ewe weight was additionally restricted. So that's BLX2, so for the Ball-Lester one, I'm aiming at no change in adult weight, mature ewe weight, whereas for the CMDP objective, where I actually aimed for a reduction of 1 kilo in mature ewe weight over 10 years. And so I did that because from the survey response, it was more important to commercial maternal breeders. Then in the last one, I've just gone for no change in adult weight. Okay.
We have had one question that just says that the question implies ewe weights are already too high. Do clients feel their ewes are already too big?
Yeah, so if you just take the survey at its word, then that's what you would think. I'll just go back to that. So the question in the survey was, reducing adult ewe weight is of high importance. So 7 out of 11 people for commercial maternals agree with that statement. Now, you know, I do realise that it's, you know, it's quite a big thing, really, in my view. And I think after we've got 2 sets of results to show you, one where adult weight is restricted and one where it's not, well, additionally restricted. And when we come to the survey after the webinar, we've got another question about this, which is worded in a slightly different way. And so we'll have more chance to look at that later on. Okay, just one point before we go on to the results, that if you, with these variants where we're trying to additionally restrict mature ewe weight, it's really important that you have to be measuring adult weight in breeding ewes to be able to get the changes that you'll see. So just going on to what the indexes actually look like. So this, starting off with the BLX indexes, what these graphs show you is the trait emphasis, that's the blue bars, in terms of the economic gain. So starting with the one on the left, just straight BLX, you can see that post-weaning weight there is accounting for just over 50% of the economic gain in the index. And then the next trait there, maternal weaning weight, that's just over 20% of the economic gain. Adult weight, though, that's actually giving a slight negative economic effect. You can see on the right-hand side of each graph there are some numbers, and what those are is the predicted genetic changes over a 10-year breeding program. So for post-weaning weight over 10 years, we would predict 4.3 kilograms of genetic gain, whereas for adult weight, you can see that we predict a 3.7 kilogram increase over 10 years. And the negative percent economic gain just means that increasing adult weight actually induces a cost, an economic cost, due to increased feed consumption, basically. So that's why that's a negative, even though the response is actually positive. So the trait after that is eye muscle depth. That's giving slightly over 10% of the economic gain, 0.5 millimetres over 10 years, and number of lambs weaned there is just under 20% of the economic gain, for an increase of 4.6% over 10 years. And then fleece weight down the bottom, that's a slight positive, but it's you know, a small change in fleece weight, not terribly big part of the index. Now, when we go over to the second index, BLX2, so that's where we've restricted adult weight to have a 0 change over 10 years. And what you can see there is that The response, well, we predict 0 kilos for adult weight, but the impact of that is to reduce the response in post-weaning weight, but it's obviously not coming back as much as the adult weight does. So instead of 4.3 kilos over 10 years, it comes back to 2.9 kilos. Maternal weaning weight, on the other hand, actually goes up a bit from 1.5 to 1.7 kilos, and is now accounting for more of the economic gain. So it's up to 30% of the economic gain, maternal weaning weight. Eye muscle is actually increasing a little bit as well, but number of lambs weaned actually comes back a little bit. And that's partly due to the positive genetic correlation between adult weight and number of lambs weaned, that we're restricting adult weight, so we're not quite getting all the benefit of that on number of lambs weaned. And fleece weight down the bottom doesn't really change. So those are predictions which are based on the genetic parameters which are used in AOVIS to calculate breeding values, the genetic correlations and heritabilities. And I'll just go on to show you what the indexes, just a little example of what the indexes actually look like. So these are plots of the indexes against each other for 1,030 Border Leicester sires that have been used in, they're in lamb plan since 2010. So we've got the two new indexes, BLX and BLX2, compared to the maternal dollar index. And if you look at okay, so I'm just figuring out if I can point at something with the mouse, and just in that top right corner there, you can see the correlation between the maternal dollar index and the BLX index is actually 0.99. So they are effectively the same thing, so doing the same job. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, the sires line up very closely. On the other hand, if we look at the BLX index, BLX2 index, where we've restricted adult weight, there's still quite a high correlation of 0.91 with the current index, but we're certainly getting some changes for size. As you can see in what I'm pointing to there, hopefully. So that's how the indexes themselves look against each other. Now this table down here, I'll just take a little bit to explain this, but what I've done here is I've arbitrarily selected the top 10% of sires of those 1,030 sires on each index, and then looked at how different they are to the mean. So the last row in that table shows you the mean for the 1,030 sires, the mean ASBV. So the average ASBV for birth weight is 0.2 kilos, for weaning weight is 3.7 kilos, for post-weaning weight is 5.8 kilos, and so on. And then if we look at the first line there, BLX, that's just saying if I selected the top 10% of sires on BLX, for birth weight, they will be plus 0.1 kilos heavier than the average of 0.2. And for weaning weight, they would be 2 kilos heavier. So their average would in fact be 2 plus 3.7, so 5.7 kilos, and so on. So and you can see there that the rows for BLX and the maternal dollar index are almost identical, which just backs up that correlation is 0.99 between the objectives. On the other hand, when you look at the BLX2 index there, you can see that adult weight now, instead of being 3.8 kilos heavier than the average, is now 2.2 kilos above the average. So it's around about 60% of the of the other two. So we're not getting zero. I expect that's because there are cross-flock effects which impact here, and also it would depend on how much adult weight is actually in those breeding values in the data set. So back to 2.2 kilos for adult weight for BLX2, and also slightly lower for weaning weight and post-weaning weight, but it's not, the reduction for weaning weight and post-weaning weight is not as big as the reduction for adult weight. So we do lose a little bit on early growth, but we get a bigger benefit for mature ewe weight. You can see there maternal weaning weight for BLX2 is actually 0.3, so it's higher than the other two indexes, so better maternal performance. And also we have slightly higher averages for eye muscle and fat, so 0.61 for eye muscle there for BLX2, and 0.28 for post-weaning fat. So they tend to be a little bit smaller, but better maternal performance and more muscle and fat. That's what the indexes would tend to do. Number of lambs weaned is pretty much the same, and same with fleece weight. So that's what the new indexes for BLX look like compared to the maternal dollar index. So the next one is CMDP, and here you can see, again, without the restriction on mature ewe weight, most of the gain comes from post-weaning weight, so that's approaching 60%, or 4.2 kilos over 10 years. Maternal weaning weight, 0.8 kilos over 10 years, so and a little bit under 10%. Adult weight, mature weight, ewe weight is 3.3 kilos, and again, it's the negative response as I was explaining before. A pretty similar outcome to what we've seen before for eye muscle and reproduction. And there down the bottom there, you can see that in this particular index we have WEC, and that's we expect a reduction over 10 years of 37% in WEC. This would assume that you would be measuring WEC in your breeding flock, in your breeding program, and that's about 15%, accounting for about 15% of the economic gain. When we put the restriction on mature ewe weight, remember here that we're targeting a bigger reduction, and we're actually looking at a reduction rather than holding constant. So we aim to get to -1 kilogram, and you can see that the post-weaning weights come back from 4.2 to 2.4 kilos. Again, maternal weaning weight unaffected, a little bit higher, only a little bit. Same for eye muscle depth. As we saw before, number of lambs weaned goes back a little bit, and WEC is about the same. Fleece weights, not really doing anything much in either of those indexes. It goes from a slight positive to a slight negative. Okay, so here's now we're looking at indexes for commercial maternal size that have been used since 2010. So we've got 820 size included in these plots, and you can see the CMDP new index has a correlation with the maternal dollar index of 0.93. So it's not quite as high as it was for Border Leicesters. And now the CMDP2 index is, the correlation there is 0.84. So it's a bigger change in this particular instance, because we're actually looking at taking adult weight down by -1 kilo over 10 years instead of just trying to hold it constant. So it is in fact a bigger change for this particular index. This is the table for the trait means for the top 10% of the size. And firstly, if we look at CMDP for early growth, it actually does better for CMDP than it does for the maternal dollar index. But adult weight is actually the same, so it's 2.6 for CMDP and the maternal dollar index. But the new index is getting better early growth for weaning weight and post-weaning weight. It's the same for maternal weaning weight, but it does actually get a higher response for eye muscle depth and fat, slightly lower for number of lambs weaned, and it's about the same for WEC. If, though, we look at the restricted index, remember here we're trying to get adult weight down. The result there is that we've got an adult weight breeding value difference of 1 kilo, so still not negative, but yeah. Karis has a question for me.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So we've got another question. So is a 1 kilo reduction in adult weight over 10 years too much, and why not less?
Well, I took the survey fairly literally. So the question, as I said before, was, do you agree that mature ewe size should be decreased? So I've just taken this as a starting point, given that 7 out of 11 people agreed with that, and 2 of them strongly. I decided to put more pressure on reducing adult weight in this index. You can see that, look, you know, it's open for discussion. I mean, we can certainly change this to be a lower restriction if that's what people think would be better. I just say here though that with that CMDP, if I just continue on to this, back to this table, the CMDP2 index, we've got we've had quite a big effect on adult weight there compared to the maternal dollar index, but the weaning weight and post-weaning weight are actually reasonably similar, only slightly less than they would be for maternal dollar. And the maternal weaning weight is now a little bit lower. That's probably because we put so much on reducing adult weight. But what you can see there is that this particular index has the highest response in eye muscle and fat. Again, the NLW is the same as the CMDP index, and WEC is the same all along as well. So, well, it's sort of quite interesting what it's done there. Sort of more emphasis on both these CMDP2 indexes have gone for early growth, and well, it depends on you know, relative to adult weight. They're putting on. There's more going on the early growth than there is on the current maternal dollar index. Yes, yeah. I'll just go on to the last one, which will give you an idea of what happens with the commercial maternal enterprise if we have a less restriction on adult weight. So here, you know, the difference with the last objective is that we don't have WEC and we don't have fleece weight, but the response in post-weaning weight is pretty similar. I think, if anything, when you put the restriction on, there's even less effect on the early growth. You can see there that maternal weaning weight is slightly better when we put the restriction on, once again. And same with eye muscle, as it's a pretty consistent theme that we've been seeing all the way through. These are the correlations between the indexes, and pretty much the same as what we saw with CMDP. So we've got a correlation of 0.91 between maternal dollar and the new index. Remember, this one doesn't have fleece weight in it, but the maternal dollar one does. Not that it has a terribly big effect anyway. And then, yeah, same as we've seen before, the restricted index CMC2 correlation of 0.86 with the maternal dollar index. So we are getting changes. And this is the same, the mean of the top 10%. Again, CMC compared to the maternal dollar, more emphasis on early growth. Maternal weaning weights about the same all the way through, but weaning weight and post-weaning weights are definitely highest for the CMC index. The adult weight is only slightly higher for CMC than maternal dollar. Eye muscle and fat are both quite a bit higher than maternal dollar. The restricted index, we've brought back adult weight, as you can see, but the early growth weaning weight and post-weaning weight are just as good as the maternal dollar index. And the maternal weaning weight is just as good as well. And then, once again, the big difference that we're seeing here is that this index has the highest response in eye muscle and fat compared to the two other. So that's where we are with those indexes at the moment. And just to wind the presentation up, just in summary, you know, we've developed these new indexes as a starting point. We're happy to modify them according to what people think is a fair thing. But just to point out that we've based these on breeder data for commercial production systems, which is the way things should be. The unrestricted indexes are certainly not hugely different to the current indexes. They give pretty similar rankings, very close in the case of the Border Leicesters, but obviously restricting the change in mature ewe weight causes larger differences. And just the way that we've done this, it's sort of pointing towards a future strategy for the way that we can implement maternal indexes, in that we would have production system-based breeding objectives, and we've got three here. We've got the Border Leicester crossing system, the self-replacing dual purpose, and the self-replacing meat-only carcass breeding objectives. So that's what we're looking at the moment. If people have other ideas, we can certainly take that into consideration. So but in general terms, we start with these breeding objectives, and then we design indexes to meet them, and they can change according to needs and new information. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Swanee. So hopefully, we only had a couple of questions there, so hopefully we didn't lose any of you along the way. I'd like to probably, before we stop now, open up for a few questions. If you have any, send them through. To begin with, we have one from Dave, but I don't think it's related to sheep in any way. So he wants to know, where do butterflies go when it rains? Hopefully some of you have some better questions than that. So we'll stay on board for a couple more minutes, waiting to see if any questions come through the chat, and answering them. Otherwise, we're happy for you to leave when you'd like. The process from now is that we'll have a survey. We'll load this link of the recorded webinar and the survey into an email, and we'll send that to all maternal breeders. So you'll have a chance to watch the webinar again if you'd like. We would really value your feedback here in regards to the survey. It does address a few of the questions, especially around adult weight and the emphasis on worm egg count in your flock. So it would be great to hear what you have to say there. Any other questions or feedback that you have, we'd love to get it all in writing this year and collate it all. So if you have any, please contact myself. We'll collate it all and send it on to Andrew. Thanks again for coming in. We still haven't got any questions, but we'll wait around a little bit longer.
So I can answer, well, the first one, I don't know about butterflies, Dave, but I just wish it'd rain.
Okay, we've got one question. It looks like the reduction in adult weight will lead to muscular sheep with lower number of lambs weaned. Do you have any comments there, Swanee?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I'd kind of agree with that, but it's not going to produce lower number of lambs weaned. It's still going, number of lambs weaned is still going to increase, but not quite as a fast rate. So you can see that the changes are always still positive for number of lambs weaned, just not quite as big.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think that is one thing that we haven't really talked about much in the survey, and we can definitely add that in now, is how are people feeling about that? I'm sure Swanee has a way that we can word that a bit better.
Well, it's a little bit difficult to, you know, to boost that. It's a consequence of the correlations between adult weight and number of lambs weaned. So there's not a great deal you can do about it, I don't think.
Okay, so we've got two more questions now. The next one is, what physical adult weights will be used? What is currently being used?
Yeah, so I think the idea is to, I think people are being encouraged to collect adult weights, pre-joining adult weights, but maybe Karis knows more about that than me. You don't, no, okay. So Karis is shaking her head, but yeah, yeah. So within the current land plan model, we can cope with up to 5 repeat records of adult ewe weight, and so that starts out at 2 years of age. So our idea is that people would take a pre-joining body weight and supply that to the analysis, and that would, if you're worried about adult weight, then you really need to be recording it to have some control over it.
I think that links into our next question a little bit too. We've got one saying, I believe birth weight is of higher importance than adult weight. As this was not a question in the first survey, perhaps it's a bigger issue. I think that's again goes to what's recorded and definitely is addressed in our next survey. Do you have any other comments there, Swanee?
Well, I'll be interested to know in terms of birth weight, what people you know, whether people want birth weights to be decreasing or increasing or optimised. So, I mean, in terms of a breeding objective, what we set up to do at the moment is we can also think about including the trait lambing ease, and that's one effect of birth weight. Certainly in single-born lambs, in twin-born lambs it might be a little bit different. So I'm interested in what people say about the issues as well. Not really an answer, but I'm a question for breeders.
Okay, the next question is, do we have any work on the negative effects of eye muscle depth on the survival of ewes in the field? I.e. casting, etc. Do broadbacks kill ewes at lambing time?
No, we don't have any data on that I'm aware of.
Another one that goes back to our mature age ewes is, do we want weights on them? As a data nerd as well, I'd probably say the more data the better. And simple yes is a good answer for that. What do you think?
Yes, yep. Absolutely.
Another one is, WEC has no importance for people here, so leaving them out of one index is helpful. Definitely good feedback to have. We will have those questions again in the survey. So although we've got the feedback here and we'll be collating all the feedback in the webinar, please fill out the survey as well, and we'll send out a link to that as soon as we can.
would say that we can also make a couple of different variants, if you like, of one or all of the indexes. So, for example, you could have a dual-purpose index with and without WEC.
Definitely, I think if we can see the need for it, there's no problem with doing that. And we already do a lot in the merino analysis, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So we might leave it there. We've got a few more questions. So we'll close off the questions with the final ones that we've got here. And there is always more chance to view these questions in the survey as well as add any comments that you have. I think the rest are just a few comments. I'm not sure if they're coming up on everyone's screen. So we've got, what is the effect of birth weight in CM? I'm guessing.
Oh, commercial maternal.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not really understanding the question, but
no.
It's not actually part of the breeding objective. What we're doing on the slides that you're seeing in front of you is just looking at the consequences of selecting on the index, and it's not really having any impact on birth weight.
Okay, well, we might leave it there for now. I think the rest of the questions and comments there, you'll be able to explain a little bit more by answering our survey. Sorry. Thank you for logging in and
has left the meeting.
We've got quite a few people on board, so it's great to see that we are getting people to things like this. We'll be running another webinar in a couple of weeks about analysis changes that will be happening in all of the Lamb Plan, Merino Select and Dooney analyses. So keep an ear out for those. And in the survey, we do have an area for feedback on the actual webinar, how we've gone about it, how easy you guys found it and things like that. So it'd be great to see and hear what you, how you've experienced today, and hopefully we can improve from there. So thanks again, and we'll close the meeting off now.
Kate Doherty
has left the meeting.
Still close yet.